Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Paytm Money Talks, today's episode. And the topic is investing in India's infrastructure boom. I'm Neeraj Gogoi, your host for the talk. I'm sure this topic sounds very exciting and it's very interesting as well. And when you talk about infrastructure, there are so many things are happening. One of the big push of the government is rapid modern infrastructure development. Just few days back, we have got Mumbai Trans Harbour Link that Atal Setu inaugurated by the Prime Minister. It's a great engineering marvel and a landmark in India's infrastructure journey. In fact, again, vibrant Gujarat summit, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman spoke about India becoming $5 trillion economy in 2028 and $30 trillion economy 2047. All sounds so exciting, right? So when government is doing so much, our India is growing so fast in terms of infrastructure. Definitely, there are a lot many opportunities for investors to create wealth by investing. So today, the topic is exactly for that: how to use infrastructure development as your opportunity to create wealth. So again, this talk is powered by Paytm Money. Okay, welcome back. So today my guest is Mr. Ihab Dalwai. He's a fund manager with ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund with lots of experience in fund managers, different asset classes. It's a great pleasure to have Ihab. Ihab, welcome onto the stage. If you can switch on your camera.
Yeah. Hi, Neeraj. Thank you for having
Hi,
me.
Ihab. Yeah. Ihab, it's an exciting time, right? The market is at all-time high, making new highs almost every day, with an exception of today. So I think before we get into our infrastructure opportunity, let's take this opportunity to ask you a few questions about the market. How does it look like? 2023 was exciting. 2024 seems to be even more exciting, right? Elections and so many macroeconomic things are coming up. So what's your take on 2024? How it's you think that's going to unfold?
Yeah, yeah. So, see, if you look at the market and actually the broader market, and just taking a step back and looking over last 3 years how the market has panned out.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially since COVID, also market, like if you take at the time of COVID, market is a function of two things, which is the multiple which we are paying and the earnings growth or earnings which is there in the market. So during the time of COVID, multiples were low. The earnings of corporate India were also low. So there's one ratio which I always look at is corporate profitability to GDP. So
Mm-hmm.
this ratio ranges from 2% to 6%. So during COVID, it was as low as 2%. So you had suppressed earnings plus a suppressed multiple. But what has happened over last 3 years, I would say since COVID, that valuations have gone up. So now, if you look at 1 year forward multiple also for the large cap Nifty itself, it is now like
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around 20, 21 times 1 year forward. And if you look at this ratio of corporate profitability to GDP, that is also inched up to around 5.5%. So both of these indicators, which ultimately drive return in the market, are slightly on an elevated basis. So my expectation is that the return expectation should not be as high as what we've experienced over the last 2 to 3 years, because these two functions which drive returns in the market are slightly high. But the earnings growth potential of corporate India continues to be strong. So earnings growth should trend slightly higher than what nominal GDP growth is. So one can expect 10 to 12% or slightly higher than that earnings growth over the next 2 years. So that should ultimately lead to market returns if there is no derating in the market. Yeah.
ओके, ओके, ओके। सो एज़ एक्सपेक्टेड एक्चुअली हम लोग ने काफ़ी लोगों ने रिक्वेस्ट किए हैं कि हम लोग को हिंदी में भी बात करना चाहिए, हम लोग का राष्ट्रभाषा है। तो हम लोग हिंदी में भी बात करेंगे बिल्कुल मिस्टर सियांग वुड डोंट वरी। ओके, सो हम लोग नाउ जब हम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर्स का बात करते हैं, ऑफ कोर्स जो हम 5 ट्रिलियन, 30 ट्रिलियन, 10 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी हम लोग बात करते हैं, तो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हैज़ टू लीड, है कि नहीं? अगर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ग्रो नहीं करेगा, देन देयर विल बी अ बॉटलनेक। सो आप कैसे देखते हैं कि हाउ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इज़ लाइकली टू प्ले बिग रोल इन दैट एंड कितना अपॉर्च्युनिटीज़ है? एंड मैंने देख रहा था कि आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंड लास्ट ईयर दे हैव मतलब बहुत फिनोमिनल रिटर्न 48%, 49% they have generated. So how do you think infrastructure as a sector as an opportunity?
करेक्ट। सो देखिए, अगर आप गवर्नमेंट की स्पेंडिंग देखेंगे, स्पेशली
Mhm.
द कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर जो बजट में आता है, उसका ग्रोथ देखेंगे वो द लास्ट 2 टू 3 इयर्स, दैट हैज़ बीन फिनोमिनल। Rightly so, because there are certain public infrastructure which
Mhm.
government has to build and create, because उसमें ज़्यादा ROE नहीं बनता, because it is not for the private sector to build and own and operate these these infrastructure, be it a very strong road network, be it a railway network, providing basic needs such as water to the last mile as well. And rightly so, the government has been investing in these segments for the last 2 to 3 years. और उसका growth is visible in the budgetary allocations. The
Mhm.
expectation is that this elevated capital expenditure would continue going ahead as well. Uh, and at times, people say that the fiscal deficit has increased in India over the last, especially during COVID, and it continues to be slightly elevated. But the counter to that is that the quality of spending has phenomenally improved, because
Mhm.
government is spending on asset creation. I think it is a long term asset which is created. इसके वजह से एंड कंज्यूमर और एंड सिटीजन्स के लिए प्रोडक्टिविटी बूस्टर भी मिल जाता है काफ़ी। सो इट अल्टीमेटली हेल्प्स इम्प्रूविंग प्रोडक्टिविटी, व्हिच अल्टीमेटली increases the GDP or GDP growth rate for us.
करेक्ट। आई थिंक काफ़ी सारे लोगों ने क्वेश्चन पूछना भी चालू कर दिया। इनफैक्ट आई थिंक इहाब हैज़ गॉट अ फैंटास्टिक प्रेजेंटेशन जो आपने शेयर किए थे एक्चुअली बिफोर इट। सो you can where he has taken us through the entire process, what are the different aspects. So would you like to present
Yeah, we
your
can we can
your
go we can go ahead
slides?
with the presentation. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
सी, अगर आप इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एज अ स्पेस अगर कोई देखेगा ना, इट इज क्वाइट एक्चुअली अ ब्रॉडर space. It is
Mhm.
not restricted only to construction or asset creation,
Mhm.
but one has to think beyond that, because it also encompasses certain segments of the market which cater to private capex as well. Like,
Mhm.
अगर utilization levels private industries में बढ़ रहा है, so then they have to spend on capacity creation. So there are various companies in the capital goods space also which cater
Mhm.
to that. And then there are commodities, be it cements or other metals as well, which also fall under infrastructure as a broader thought process.
Mhm.
तो अगर देखेंगे कि देखो, कोई भी थीम या सेक्टर में अगर इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हो, तो ऑन अ टॉप डाउन बेसिस आल्सो देयर हैज टू
Mhm.
बी अ पुश फॉर दैट थीम। फोकस होना चाहिए वो थीम, बी इट पॉलिसी मेकर्स का या मैक्रो सेटअप फेवरेबल होना चाहिए फॉर दैट थीम टू प्ले आउट। तो अगर हम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्पेस को देखेंगे, उसमें वो दोनों बेनिफिट दिख रहे हैं आज। आज हमें मैक्रो सेटअप में भी अच्छा टेलविंड या अच्छा विजिबिलिटी मिल रहा है, प्लस गवर्नमेंट का
Mhm.
तो फोकस है ही, जैसे मैंने पहले बोला कि उनको स्पेंड करना है इन टर्म्स ऑफ एसेट क्रिएशन ऑन दी पब्लिक इंफ्रा साइड। तो on macro factors, how is it favorable? One is, if you look at banks' balance sheet, they have significantly
Mhm.
I have a slide on that later on as well, but these are certain indicators which tell us that the macro has improved a lot. Corporate India has also delevered. So corporate India's balance sheet is also improved. They're sitting on strong cash flows. So agar unka utilization level reaches 75-80%, and when they start
Mhm.
investing for growth, it can lead to a very strong private capex as well. Secondly, what we have seen, especially post demon, post GST, post COVID, also that the economy has become more formalized, post
Mhm.
digitalization of the economy as well. because abhi most of the payments happen through digital platforms. There is very few even small ticket payments nowadays happen through UPI. So all these factors have led to the formalization of the economy. This again bodes well for the listed space as well. And from a government perspective, like I mentioned, capex expenditure has, like last year, it had increased almost 25%. There have been incentives to set up new manufacturing capacity with lower tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
PLI भी एक काफी बड़ा पुश है गवर्नमेंट का टू इंसेंटिवाइज डोमेस्टिक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग। एंड उसके अलावा भी गवर्नमेंट के नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन या प्लान भी है टू विजुअलाइज एंड टू अल्टीमेटली अचीव the asset base which we want to achieve on the infrastructure side. So if you go on to the next slide, I can ये स्लाइड में ना हमने बस ये दिखाया कि कैसे बैलेंस शीट्स इंप्रूव हुई है बैंकिंग सिस्टम की एंड कॉर्पोरेट इंडिया के भी। जो चार्ट लेफ्ट हैंड साइड में है, जो ऑरेंज बार है वो कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी है। तो इफ बैंकिंग
Mm-hmm.
सिस्टम इज वेरी वेल कैपिटलाइज्ड, तो दे हैव अ वेरी स्ट्रांग एबिलिटी टू लेंड टू ग्रो। सो अगर डिमांड पिकअप होता है प्राइवेट साइड में, आज तो रिटेल का डिमांड काफी स्ट्रांग है, मॉर्गेजेस स्ट्रांग है, व्हीकल लोन स्ट्रांग है, पर्सनल लोन स्ट्रांग है। बट अगर कॉर्पोरेट्स ऑल्सो स्टार्ट बोरिंग, बैंक्स बैलेंस शीट इज वेरी स्ट्रांग। जो वो लाइन है जो 6% से ऑलमोस्ट 1% आ गया है, which is the non-performing assets of the banking system. So banking
Mm-hmm.
system is sitting on very low non-performing assets as well. So this clearly shows that the bank's balance sheet is very strong. So if
Mm-hmm.
private demand picks up on the capex side as well, then there is strong ability of the banking system to lend to them. The chart on right hand side shows how corporate debt to GDP has reduced. So corporate India has been deleveraging. So जो 62% to GDP corporate debt था, वो almost 50% तक आ गया था। तो corporate balance sheet भी काफी strong है। तो again same thing, अगर demand pickup हो रहा है and corporate India wants to set up new capacity, there is the balance sheet is strong enough for them to create this capacity. So moving on to the next slide. तो इसमें बस मैंने बोला था कि केपेक्स का जो एक्सपेक्टेड था गवर्नमेंट का, द टेबल ऑन द बॉटम, this clearly highlights the focus of the government to spend more on capex. So इसका FY24 का नंबर 10 लाख करोड़ है। जो
Mm-hmm.
7 मंथ का है वो एक्चुअल स्पेंड है सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट का। तो इसमें से क्लियरली दिख जाता है कि रोड सेक्टर के लिए एलोकेशन कितना बड़ा है, रेलवे सेक्टर के लिए कितना बड़ा है। वाटर भी काफ़ी एक बड़ा पुश है। तो जो जल जीवन स्कीम है गवर्नमेंट का कि टिल रूरल एंड टिल द लास्ट माइल पानी मिलना चाहिए, उसके लिए भी बजटरी एलोकेशंस काफ़ी बड़े हैं। तो ये एंड इट्स अ वेरी गुड mandate by the government to spend more on these because it is ultimately public, like I mentioned earlier, these are public infrastructural assets which ultimately help improving the productivity of the people of India. Uh, so if you move on the next slide, यहाँ पे भी जो मैंने पहले मेंशन किया था कि रेलवे भी काफ़ी एक बड़ा फ़ोकस है। तो आजकल आई थिंक फ्यू ऑफ आवर व्यूअर्स वुड हैव ट्रैवल्ड इन दी वंदे भारत ट्रेन्स एज़ वेल। This again is a new initiative by the government of India. There are various other programs which the government of India is trying to carry out within the broader railway allocation or budget. High speed rail is also one thing which there is only currently there's one line which is under construction, which is Mumbai Ahmedabad, but there are
Mm-hmm.
multiple lines which are envisaged going ahead once this comes up. Dedicated freight corridor in some portion has already started. पहले क्या होता था कि फ्रेट एंड पैसेंजर एक ही नेटवर्क में ऑपरेट
चलते
होते,
थे।
बट उसकी वजह से फ्रेट ऑल्सो यूज टू मूव स्लो बिकॉज पैसेंजर ट्रेन को थोड़ा प्रेफरेंस मिलता था। बट अभी क्या है कि फ्रेट कॉरिडोर सेपरेट करके टर्न अराउंड टाइम ऑफ फ्रेट मूवमेंट हैज इम्प्रूव्ड, which ultimately results in lower logistic cost for the end for the manufacturer or the producer of the goods as well. Metro has also been a big focus of the government. So our city Mumbai is also undergoing a huge metro capex currently. We just had one line, two more lines have been added, and we have almost envisaged to add around 5 to 6 lines totally. or slightly more than that also. So the network which metro is also expected to create is also gone up significantly. And the good part about the carrying out these huge capex is that though central government contributes to it, state governments put into it, or the local authority puts into it, but India or most of these assets end up getting very good long-term debt or long-term money from various global agencies as well. So one such agency is JICA, which is a Japan-based agency, which actively
Hmm.
invests or provides long-term funding at a very low cost to these projects. So which is also good for India because it ultimately doesn't increase or expand the cost of projects as well. Uh, Something on the right hand side is on manufacturing, which just wanted to highlight. Uh, as we all know, PLI is a big focus of the government. Government has announced big allocation to PLI, and within that, there are various other segments or sectors which the government is focusing on. तो इसमें इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पिछले 5-6 साल में जो मोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का जो इंक्रीज हुआ है इंडिया में वो भी काफी
Hmm.
सिग्निफिकेंट है सो विच इज उसमें बस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ही नहीं इंडिया हैज नाउ स्टार्टेड एक्सपोर्टिंग लॉट ऑफ मोबाइल फोन्स आउटसाइड इंडिया एज वेल so all this is possible because of certain initial support by the government so that these companies can build a scale and जब scale आ जाता है उसके बाद you become competitive on a global landscape and then you can start exporting as well. तो सिमिलरली सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में भी फोकस है गवर्नमेंट का तो उसके लिए $30 बिलियन का इंसेंटिव इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए सेट असाइड किया था तो उसमें से 10 बिलियन है सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए so after this announcement, there are a lot of companies, global companies like Micron, AMD, and few other companies which have shown interest and want to set up, at least start with the testing and assembly part of the semiconductor manufacturing. Yeah, next slide, please. देखो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में और एक सेगमेंट आता है वो है एनर्जी विच इज पावर बी इट ट्रांसमिशन एंड सो
Hmm.
तो एज वी ऑल नो लाइक 5 या 6 साल पहले अपना सिग्निफिकेंट और आज भी सिग्निफिकेंट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ऑफ और प्रोडक्शन ऑफ पावर हैपेंस थ्रू कोल बेस्ड पावर सप्लाई but as the world is transitioning to cleaner fuel, India has also taken a stance that it wants to add a lot of renewable capacity. And we've already added, but the focus is to add a significant amount of renewable capacity going ahead. तो जो टेबल है ऑन दी लेफ्ट हैंड साइड टॉप which shows that अगले 8 या 9 साल में we are going to add around 300 gigawatts of solar capacity versus only 50 gigawatts of coal-based capacity. So the
Hmm.
significant push is towards renewable capacity, be it solar, be it wind, and a bit of hydro as well. तो इसके लिए बिकॉज अगर अल्टीमेटली एंड डिमांड सोलर पैनल्स का है या सोलर इक्विपमेंट्स का है तो इसलिए गवर्नमेंट ने सोलार के लिए भी एक पीएलआई स्कीम लॉन्च किया था वहां पे मॉड्यूल
Hmm.
मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को भी इंसेंटिव दे दिया है बिकॉज इफ इंडिया इज गोइंग टू कंज्यूम सो मच ऑफ सोलर पैनल्स इट इज गुड दैट वी मेक इन इंडिया एज वेल दोस पैनल्स
Correct.
so that push has also been there for the government so and what we are experiencing currently is that in the interim there is a bit of what we see is that the supply is not been able to catch up with the demand of power as well so last 1 year power demand was quite strong which is very surprising so as a result of which the investments in the power sector is also expected to be pretty high going ahead as well because we need
Hmm.
to cater to that high demand which we are seeing तो उसके लिए ट्रांसमिशन एक्सपेंडिचर और ट्रांसमिशन इन्वेस्टमेंट भी काफी बड़ा है बिकॉज सोलार के केस में क्या होता है कि दोपहर को काफी जनरेशन होता है बट इवनिंग में इतना जनरेशन नहीं होता है तो उसके वजह से इफ यू हैव अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग transmission grid you will be able to transmit those powers during those morning times or afternoon times as well so when your production mix changes from conventional coal based to renewable you need to invest more and more into transmission and the last mile distribution as well so that investment is also picking up currently in India. If you move on to the next slide please and this is something which I think government is also committed A lot of corporates are also committing that we need to reduce emissions. And this again fits into the energy transition which we are seeing from coal-based, gas-based to more renewable-based. There is a lot of focus on investing in green hydrogen as well. So electrolyzers which are used to manufacture hydrogen, उसके लिए भी एक PLI
Mm-hmm.
है. EV will also end up picking up. So उसके लिए बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए भी एक अलग PLI स्कीम है. तो
Mm.
गवर्नमेंट focus is clear that we need to transition to cleaner fuel, cleaner source of energy consumption, because the government has committed to emission reduction, and a lot of corporates have also committed simultaneously. So as a result of which, this transition will also require a lot of investments. So the point I'm trying to make is that the broader infrastructure is seeing a lot of tailwind from different policy changes also, which we are seeing, which
Mm-hmm.
again will has or will give a lot of durability to the growth which you are expecting in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And last slide, please. So, lastly, I'm saying real estate also forms a part of the broader infrastructure, because housing creation, which ultimately leads to cement demand or domestic steel demand increases. And we can, within the infrastructure space, one can invest in pure real estate developers as well. So, इसका भी हम लोग ने देखा है कि cycle has turned around. So
Mm.
during COVID time, it had bottomed. So 2013 to almost 20, real estate was in a down cycle. But over the last 3 years, what we are seeing is that we have seen an upcycle in real estate, which again gives a fillip to the overall infrastructure space. So broadly, if I just want to conclude this presentation, is that there is a government push to create public infra assets, be it roads, a stronger railway network, be it availability of last mile water or few other basic needs of the citizens. Secondly, we are seeing that we are going through an energy transition today. So the energy
Mm-hmm.
transition will also require a lot of investments, not only to meet the growth of energy consumption, but also to meet the transition requirements. We are seeing a strong real estate cycle also, which bodes well for uh, demand growth for various other ancillary industries as well, and with for real estate developers, which fall under the infrastructure basket. So, all in all, there is a good macro tailwind for this sector. And when
Mm-hmm.
you look at this segment relative to the market, मार्केट का मल्टीपल हमें 20 या 25 टाइम दिखता है, बट ये सेगमेंट का मल्टीपल हैज बीन trading at a lower than what the market multiple has been. So from a valuation perspective also, there is not too much worry of being invested in this segment today.
Wonderful. In fact, I think from next 5 to 10 years perspective, in fact, the infrastructure is one of the team that's really going to play out very well. So again, हम लोग का जितने भी viewers हैं उनको मैं request करूंगा कि जो भी आपका questions हैं, please feel free type your questions and I'm going to ask that question to Ihab.
Yeah.
तो Ihab, मेरा first question एक viewer का है, Mr. Mohammad Irshad. Now this question actually most of the people have. I think this question is very important to address too. Ki when we know that infrastructure sector is going to, is going to have lots of tailwind. Now, is it better to choose infrastructure fund or individual infrastructure companies that is going to benefit in 2024 beyond that? So, what is your view?
So, see, basically, the way I also look after the fund or manage the fund is that विद इन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्या होता है कि उसमें काफी सारे सब सेक्टर्स हैं, जैसे मैंने पहले समझाया.
Mhm.
तो एज अ फंड मैनेजर मेरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होती है टू आइडेंटिफाई कौन सा सब सेक्टर में वैल्यूएशन कंफर्ट भी है, कौन से सेक्टर में
Mhm.
अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ एक्सपेक्टेशन स्ट्रांग हो सकते हैं, कौन से सेक्टर में रिटर्न पोटेंशियल भी है. So
Mhm.
rotating between these sectors within the infrastructure space also, one can generate returns, because today we know that there is a good push for this sector. So but valuation is not comfortable, so I may not be too much invested in that sector today. But on a relative
Mhm.
basis, I know okay, there is not too much push for this sector, but the growth profile is decent for this sector, and there is valuation comfort. So I may be more invested in that sector. So I think having a portfolio approach to infrastructure as a space is a better way of investing, because there can be many phases of ups and downs for each of the subsector. So it will be very
Mm-hmm.
difficult for an individual to enter a particular stock or a particular subsector and then play that subsector cycle also very well. So that responsibility is something which we take up, and we try to invest or divest from different subsectors within infrastructure and try to make money or returns for the investor. Yeah.
लवली लवली अनिल भल्ला जी आपने पूछे कि पीपीटी शेयर्स करेंगे क्या अनिल भल्ला जी इट विल बी इन द यूट्यूब यू कैन वॉच इट एज मेनी टाइम्स एज यू कैन you'll get all the data points are there that is there in the ppt so no worry for that so next question है चंद्र प्रकाश मौर्य जी से न्यू एनएफओ में पैसा लगाना ठीक है क्या अभी अभी at this point of time in the infrastructure एनएफओ
So I'm not aware कि किसका एनएफओ भी आया है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्पेस में, बट सी जनरली एन एनएफओ और एन एग्जिस्टिंग फंड, फ्रैंकली आई फील देयर शुड नॉट बी एनी डिफरेंस, बिकॉज आपको एनएफओ में भी 10 का एनएवी मिल रहा होगा, तो it just depends. An existing fund ka, if you the same day if you invest in both the funds, it doesn't matter if you're investing in an NFO or an existing fund. So I think NFO को ऐसे, it is not like a stock IPO. NFO is not a stock IPO कि आपको कुछ listing gains मिल सकते हैं या कुछ हो सकता है.
yes
So one should not differentiate between an NFO or an existing fund is what I feel. Yeah.
Okay. Matlab, it's if you're convinced about the theme, go ahead and buy a good infrastructure fund. In fact, there are lot many funds are there,
Correct.
so you can choose on your own. You
Correct.
know, मोहित यादव से एक क्वेश्चन है हमें किस इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कंपनीज में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए फॉर लॉन्ग टर्म रिटर्न आई थिंक दैट क्वेश्चन इज सिमिलर टू मोहम्मद इरशाद
देखिए, एक जनरली इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो बिजनेसेस होते हैं ना, वो बी टू बी बिजनेसेस होते हैं या अ, थोड़े सिक्लिकल बिजनेसेस होते हैं. लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टिंग, बाय एंड होल्ड इन्वेस्टिंग, जनरली हम बी टू सी कंपनीज, वन शुड प्रेफर इन बी टू सी कंपनीज जहाँ
हाँ
पे एकदम लॉन्ग टर्म मोट है, आरओईज हाई है. बिकॉज जनरली अगर आपके पास अच्छा धंधा है तो आपका आरओई भी काफी हाई होता है. लेकिन अगर आप कोई कोई बी टू सी कंपनीज देखेंगे, उनका आरओई 50% है, 40%, 50% है.
करेक्ट हम्म
अ, तो जनरली इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्पेस में इतने हाई आरओईज नहीं मिलेंगे आपको, क्योंकि इट इज अ हाईली
हम्म
कॉम्पिटिटिव इंडस्ट्री. अगर आप कोई टेंडर खोलेंगे कोई भी एक प्रोजेक्ट के लिए, तो उसके लिए काफी बिडर्स आ जाते हैं. आज आप
हम्म
रोड सेगमेंट देखेंगे तो उसमें कॉम्पिटिटिव इंटेंसिटी काफी हाई है. तो अगर जहाँ कंपटीशन हाई है वहाँ पे ज़्यादा आरओईज नहीं बनेंगे. तो वन शुड टेक अ cyclical approach like I've mentioned earlier, and try to play the cycle in the infrastructure rather than having a long term buy and hold philosophy in infrastructure as a space, because it's ultimately a B2B business. एंड उसमें भी क्या होता है, कभी भी कॉम्पिटिटिव इंटेंसिटी काफी हाई हो जाती है. कोई कोई प्लेयर्स
हम्म
प्रोजेक्ट एकदम कम मार्जिन में ले लेते हैं. दे थिंक दैट दे कैन कंप्लीट इट, बट फिर वो उनसे कंप्लीट नहीं हो जाता, तो फिर उनको कुछ बैलेंस शीट स्ट्रेस आ जाता है फिर. तो हम लोगों ने लास्ट साइकिल में वो फेज देखा था. तो
हम्म
इसीलिए आई थिंक अ पोर्टफोलियो अप्रोच इज बेटर, एंड प्लेइंग द साइकिल इज बेटर rather than having a long term buy and hold thought process in infrastructure space.
ओके ग्रेट सो मैं अभी दो क्वेश्चंस लूंगा एक महेंद्र कुमार ही वांट्स टू नो अबाउट पावर ट्रांसमिशन कंपनी एंड एट द सेम टाइम स्क्रोल एंड फंड हीज क्वेश्चन इज कि लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए बताइए सर सो
सो पावर ट्रांसमिशन, सी देखो, uh, अगर आप पिछले 10 साल की पावर सेक्टर में फेज देखेंगे ना, तो पहले जो 5 साल था उसमें काफी हाई एक्सपेंडिचर हुआ था ट्रांसमिशन में. और पिछले 5 साल में काफी जनरेटिंग एसेट्स ऑन स्ट्रीम आए हैं. ट्रांसमिशन उतना नहीं आया जितना जनरेटिंग एसेट्स आए. बट अल्टीमेटली जैसे जनरेशन ग्रो होता है, ट्रांसमिशन भी ग्रो होना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली क्या होता है कि जनरेशन इज कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड इन वन प्लेस, एंड यू नीड टू पावर कंजम्पशन इज स्प्रेड अक्रॉस all over India. So you need to transmit that concentrated generation to a very fragmented consumption. So transmission capex keeps continuing as and when generation capex happens. And हमें transmission capex और करना पड़ेगा, because our power production mix is changing. अगर वही मिक्स रहता, जितना रिन्यूएबल है उतना ही कोल, वो सब मिक्स आगे जाके भी होगा, तो उतना ज़्यादा स्पेंड नहीं करना पड़ेगा, बट वी विल नीड more expenditure because we are shifting towards more renewable source of power. And secondly, like if you end up transmitting power at higher and higher voltages, you save on transmission. So there is always a transition from a low voltage power transmission to a high voltage power transmission. तो वो उसके टू सेव ऑन पर यूनिट ट्रांसमिशन कॉस्ट, तो एज एंड व्हेन वी कीप अपग्रेडिंग द ट्रांसमिशन नेटवर्क, वो भी एक एक्सपेंडिचर आ जाता
हम्म।
है।
ओके। एक सौरभ सुराना का क्वेश्चन है, सर हाउ लॉन्ग डू यू थिंक द इंफ्रा बूम विल लास्ट? 1 to 2 years or 2 to 3 years?
देखिए, इंफ्रा में लाइक आई मेंशन देयर आर थ्री पार्टिसिपेंट्स। एक है गवर्नमेंट, गवर्नमेंट तो स्पेंड कर रहा है, गवर्नमेंट ने एक रोड मैप भी दिया है कि हम लोग इतना स्पेंड करेंगे अगले 5 साल, अगले 10 साल। तो थोड़ा एक साल आगे पीछे हो सकता है, बट वो विजिबिलिटी है कि गवर्नमेंट वुड कंटिन्यू स्पेंडिंग। एक दूसरा स्पेंड होता है लाइक आई मेंशन, एक प्राइवेट, जो कॉर्पोरेट प्राइवेट कंपनीज है, जो लिस्टेड प्राइवेट लाइक प्राइवेट सेक्टर के जो कंपनीज है, वो स्पेंड करेंगे। उनका स्पेंड एक्सपेंडिचर अभी तक आया नहीं है, बिकॉज दे वर सिटिंग ऑन लोअर यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ कैपेसिटी। एज एंड व्हेन यूटिलाइजेशन गोज अप, वो लोग भी स्पेंड करना चालू
हम्म।
करेंगे। तीसरा होता है हाउस होल्ड, लाइक हम और आप जब घर खरीदते हैं, वो भी एक बड़ा एक्सपेंडिचर होता है। उसमें भी यू कैन प्ले दैट एक्सपेंडिचर ऑल्सो इन द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्पेस। तो वो भी अभी मिड साइकिल में है, आई वुड से फिलहाल रियल एस्टेट एक्सपेंडिचर। So there is a push of government, there is a push of households wanting to buy houses. A third push is remaining, which is private expenditure to start spending. So as and when that picks up, that will again give a certain leg growth to infrastructure as a space. So I would say there is still some scope for this cycle to play out, or to over the next 2 years or 3 years is what I feel. Yeah.
Okay, great, wonderful. Now, there's another question from Indian Archaeology. In fact, I don't know Indian Archaeological Society, or his name is Indian Archaeology. Now, in your view, which company is the best renewable energy company in India? Any comments on
So
that? Can you? I think you cannot
correct, correct.
specifically recommend any
Comment
stock,
on,
but
yeah.
yeah.
See, renewable, you'll have to see there are different participants in the entire value chain. एक होंगे जो रिन्यूएबल डेवलपर्स है, जो एसेट ओन करेंगे। कोई कोई होंगे, देयर वुड बी सम सेगमेंट व्हिच विल बी मॉड्यूल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स, देयर वुड बी सम सेगमेंट्स व्हिच विल मेक इन्वर्टर्स। तो पूरा
Mm-hmm.
इकोसिस्टम समझना पड़ेगा, और उसके बाद वो देखना पड़ेगा कौन सी इंडस्ट्री स्ट्रक्चर ठीक है। क्योंकि क्या होता है, बहुत सारे प्लेयर्स वही इंडस्ट्री में घुस रहे हैं, तो वो आरओई और रिटर्न रेशियोज काफी सप्रेस हो जाते हैं, कंपटीशन बढ़ जाता है, लाइक आई मेंशन्ड अर्लियर। तो वी हैव टू
Mm.
सी विच सेगमेंट इज डूइंग वेल, कहाँ कंपटीशन कम है, क्या एडवांटेज है वो कंपनी का। बट इट इज अ हाई ग्रोथ सेगमेंट, नो डाउट
Mm-hmm.
अबाउट दैट, कि ये सेगमेंट विल सी अ वेरी गुड ग्रोथ ओवर द नेक्स्ट 2 years, 3 years, और in the near term. But we'll have to choose how do you invest in this segment. You'll have to see which sub segment you want to be a part of, to be
Mm.
invested in this segment. But it's a good high growth segment to be invested in. Yes.
Okay. ओके। सोहिनी लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए कुछ स्टॉक बताइए। सोहिनी विल नॉट बी एबल टू टॉक स्पेसिफिकली अबाउट स्टॉक्स, सो यू कैन पिक अप एज वी टॉक अबाउट डिफरेंट थीम्स एंड डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स
Hmm.
एज, सो वहां से आप नहीं तो द बेस्ट थिंग सोहनी इज ऑलवेज थ्रू म्यूचुअल फंड, जैसे इहाब ने कहा है कि इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए छोटे छोटे ये सब कैच करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है, बट ए फंड मैनेजर कैन मैनेज वेरी नाइसली। सो अगेन चंद्र प्रकाश मौर्य ने पूछे हैं कि आईपीओ एसएमई में पैसा लगाना चाहिए। मैंने काफी बार लगाए हैं आईपीओ में, लेकिन नहीं मिला। आईपीओ में तो मिल भी गया है कुछ। अच्छा, एसएमई आईपीओ में तो यस, इट इज ऑलवेज अ रिस्क आईपीओ के लिए। Okay, it is IPO में तो it's kind of a lottery, you might get, you might not get. Now a time good IPOs, they are oversubscribed multiple times, so yes, वो तो रहेगा ही रहेगा. Now again, this is a thematic concept,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Infrastructure is a theme, it's a
Hmm.
sectorial investment.
Hmm.
तो एक individual perspective से how much of his portfolio should be dedicated towards that particular theme? That is number one. And number two, कि क्या क्या ऐसा रिस्क फैक्टर्स है दैट वन नीड टू बी अवेयर ऑफ while investing in infrastructure sector?
करेक्ट. सो देखिए, thematic segment, yeah, funds should not be a core part of your portfolio, I feel at times, because
Hmm.
I personally feel, given where the market is today, the core part of your portfolio should be a bit of hybrid schemes. So I look
Hmm.
after multi-asset fund as well. So
Hmm.
I like that as a category to be invested in as core part of your strategy today. But one can have some allocation to thematic funds, because then you have to see which theme is going to do well over the next 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
So from
Hmm.
that perspective, I think being invested in this theme is good, is okay,
Hmm.
because there is, like I mentioned in the presentation, also there is twin tailwind. There is obviously a macro tailwind also,
Hmm.
and then there is a government push as well to create infrastructure assets to push domestic manufacturing. Real estate cycle has also picked up, so there's a lot of good government push as well in this segment. Is what I would think. Yeah.
Okay. So question है Hemendra Singh say, is it the best time to invest lump sum amount in mutual fund or go through SIP?
So I would say, like, in a thematic fund, it's I think it's best if you are positive on the theme, you buy lump sum, because you don't need to be doing an SIP in a thematic fund, is what I generally feel. But
Mhm.
there again, when I said hybrid should be a core for part of your portfolio, there again is something which I feel lump sum is good. I feel this may not be a market to do an SIP today, is what I feel. I
Mhm.
think when market is has given no returns or is subdued, I think that's a good time to keep accumulating equities as a market. I think that is a very good time to do SIP, because you keep buying units when market is not delivered. So when market has delivered good returns, I think targeted lump sum allocation is better, is what I feel.
Okay. Now again, Virendra Mishra ji ne पूछे हैं कि can you recommend few long-term stocks for long term? Again, Virendra ji, we do not recommend any stocks. This is a theme that we are discussing, so you can understand the themes, the sectors. Of course, I can ask you have one question related to your question is आप लोग का जो infrastructure fund है, you have what is the sectorial weightage? Which are the sectors got maximum weightage? If you can just take us through, I think that might suffice. That might give a good understanding to Virendra ji as well.
करेक्ट. सो देखिए, उसमें लाइक पावर इज अ थीम विच वी हैव बीन इन्वेस्टिंग. सो पावर के स्टॉक्स या सेक्टर वेटेजेस है उसमें. कंस्ट्रक्शन इज समथिंग विच आई एम पॉजिटिव ऑन. तो देर आर सर्टन
Mhm.
कंस्ट्रक्शन स्टॉक्स विच आर देयर इन दी portfolio. Apart from that, oil and gas is also a theme or a sector which is you will find weightages in the portfolio. उसके अलावा capital goods also, like I mentioned, उसकी
Mhm.
भी investments है. And ultimately banking का भी weight है, because देखिए, banking also ultimately lends to these players to create assets, or lends to EPC players for working capital funding. So banking can also participate in the infrastructure boom.
Mhm.
But so उसके तो banking stocks के लिए भी थोड़े बहुत weightages है.
Okay. Okay. There are काफी sir. Okay. Mr. L.S. Chauhan, sir, please tell about thematic portfolio sector wise. I don't know if you have got what he is asking. If you can say
So
something on this.
I just mentioned, right, like, there is
Mm.
power as a sector we've invested in,
Mhm.
construction as a sector, especially like buildings, companies which are involved in creating buildings, factories, transmission companies.
Mhm.
So broadly, these are the sectors we are invested in: cap goods, oil and gas,
Mhm.
and banking as a space as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Anil Valla ने पूछे हैं कि okay, he joined a little bit late. Can you please share what is the percentage or weightage of sector-wise allocation of fund considering potential the company coming years, say 5 years? Can you please share what is the percentage of weightage of sector-wise allocation of funds considering potential the coming years, say 5 years, 5 years perspective में?
तो जैसे मैंने बताया, लाइक 15 अराउंड 13-15% पावर सेक्टर में होगा इन्वेस्टेड.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at construction as a space as well, उधर again 13-15% invested होगा. Banking as a space or financials as a space, वापस 13-15% invested होगा. These are broadly allocations because I can't recollect the exact allocation to each sector, but these are the broad allocations which you can find in the ICICI Prudential Infrastructure Fund. And
Mm-hmm.
oil and gas maybe I think 15 से ज़्यादा थोड़ा invested होगा. Cement में 10% या 10-12%, 10 approximately 10% या slightly more than that उसमें invested है. So it is quite diversified across sectors, but the highest weightage would be somewhere around that 15% in a
15.
particular sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are two things to watch out for. Of course, quite a few. Ek, geopolitics. We are seeing lots of new things are developing in
Mm,
very close to India of late. And second is the interest rate. We are
mm,
already at the interest rate peak and expecting some kind of cut probably in 2024. So considering all these factors, again, election year, how do you think? And new budget, new government. The budget is also coming next month. You know, uh, of course, interim budget. What do you think about taking into account all these factors about?
correct. So obviously, like India being a current account deficit country,
Mhm.
global macro indicators also impact us because if there is tightening on the global landscape, it impacts us because we invest more than what we save. That is what current account deficit highlights. So we need to borrow capital from outside to invest. But it's a good thing that if things are easing on a global landscape, it is good for India because capital availability will not be a problem when there is current account deficit for India. And one good thing about India, which over the last 3 years, is that a lot of global economies saw a very high inflation.
Mhm.
Like because of the Russia-Ukraine war, also there was spike in energy prices. But good part about India was that most of our till now the power needs was coming through domestic coal, and domestic coal prices are not linked to international coal prices, so they are a bit of a so we benefited out of that because our energy bills didn't go up as what was seen in a lot of developed markets, be it UK, Europe. So we didn't face that energy inflation in India. So
Mhm.
as a result of which, our rates had also not gone up too high, as in context to what our historical rates have been. So
Mhm.
any easing on interest rate is good for this space, infrastructure space, because money is like a raw material for infrastructure space. Because if you need to build assets, you need to borrow to build, you need equity to invest to build these long dated assets. So if cost of money keeps falling or is expected to reduce, it is good for this space because you can start building more, you can grow on the asset creation mode. Yeah.
Mhm. China plus one policy, is it going to impact positively our infrastructure sector? Of course, it's going to impact manufacturing, the economy as a whole. So, how does it going to impact infrastructure sector?
See, yeah, it is going to benefit more to the manufacturing as a space, which again is
Mhm.
something which we can to some extent participate in the infrastructure space, infrastructure overall theme as well. Because a lot of these global companies are trying to diversify their supply chain or as manufacturing base which they have. So logically, India should be the one of the beneficiaries of the diversification which a lot of these global companies are doing. And one good part about India is that India has a very, very strong inherent demand for these products ultimately,
Mhm.
be it auto manufacturing, be it electronics manufacturing, or be it any other import item which we do today. So there is an inherent demand in India. So logically, the demand should be met from domestic manufacturing as well. So India has a big advantage of scale. So once you have that advantage, you can be competitive on the global landscape and can look to export as well. And to that, like I mentioned earlier, there are good favorable policy measures which the government has done through the PLI scheme also to
Mhm.
encourage manufacturing in India. So there are a lot of things which are falling in place to for that. And one very good example is like an Apple or an iPhone. So
Mm.
like 3 4 years ago, when the latest series used to get announced globally,
Mm-hmm.
like 2 to 3 earlier series used to get manufactured in India. But
Mm.
now when the iPhone 15 was announced, I think we started manufacturing, I think, in a week or so. So that also speaks a lot about the manufacturing ecosystem which we have built in India as well.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we'll take one more question. That is from Devendra Vikram Singh. Uh, we have already answered that question, but again, for for people who have joined late, what is better for retail investors: ETF, mutual fund, or stocks?
I would say mutual funds. I'm a believer in mutual funds
Mhm.
because ETFs is generally passive investing. I'm a big believer that in India you can generate alpha over the broader market over a medium to long term period of time. So mutual funds, because active investing works in India, and that's why I would prefer it over ETFs. And stocks, see, because a retail investor, I would think, would be involved in something else as well, because it'll be difficult for him on a daily basis to track a company, to analyze that company. So it'll be difficult for him to manage or maintain his portfolio diligently over a long period of time. So that is why it is always good to be invested in mutual funds, because the roles and responsibility of the fund manager is to identify sectors or themes which are expected to do well, identify stocks which they expect to do well. So that is our daily job. So I think it is always good to outsource that job to a professional fund manager, and I'm a believer in the active side of it, and hence mutual funds. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, final comments, Ihab. What's your final advice to our investors who are probably thinking, considering investing in, infrastructure fund? So, what
So
is your final word of advice to
yeah.
them?
Yeah. So, see, infrastructure is ultimately a theme. So, if you are a first-time investor, I would say one should not be fully invested in a theme or so, because he should first come in a low-risk category if you're a first-time investor or a new investor, because you have to understand your risk profile as well. So, it's always
Mm-hmm.
good to start with a hybrid scheme, be it a multi-asset fund or so. But if you are
Mm-hmm.
an existing investor who is looking to diversify outside a core part of your portfolio, trying to identify a theme which has a good tailwind of growth, and which already has, like, last 2 to 3 years have been good for this segment. But this segment is expected to do well over the medium term. Then I think it's a good allocation within the thematic basket.
Mm-hmm. So it's great talking to you, Ihab. Wonderful. I think our viewers also gained lots of insight into how to, go ahead with their infrastructure investing, plan their infrastructure fund investing. Thank you so much, and
Thank
thanks
you.
our viewers.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Neeraj.
Thank you.